Hi readers, welcome to Reading Realm. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Fear by Natasha Preston. I just reviewed her book The Island last week, so today I'm here with a review of the second book I've read by her. I pointed out in the last one that she always has very interesting covers, and I think this one is no different. My dog is here as well, being a little bit disruptive, so. This is Cosmos. Uh, he likes to try to sit on books when I read them because he wants all the attention, and it looks like this is no different. So, I have some notes I made on this book as well. My initial thoughts were that it has an interesting premise, like I said about the island. It's about how a social media trend becomes a mode of people getting killed. I'll go more into that in a little bit. But I think that especially as someone who grew up with the start of more cell phones and like tablets and social media, I feel like this book is both a thriller novel and a warning about the danger of sharing too much online. I definitely think that it has some really powerful messages about how a lot of people don't think about what they share and about how much personal information they actually put online. Um, so I definitely think that it's a very relevant message, even though hopefully most of us don't live in a town where people are murdering based off a social media trend. Um, So the protagonist of this book is Izzy. She's a high school student in a small coastal town. There's this meme that's been going around on social media where people are reposting with their worst fear about how to die. Is it just a harmless social media trend? Not really. Far from it, because then people begin to show up having been murdered in the exact way they were most afraid of dying. Um, Personally, as someone who was never popular in school and never really wanted to be, I relate to Izzy and her mentality that reposting this meme is stupid. I personally don't really keep up with a lot of social media trends. I've never been into the like social media challenges that a lot of people were into when I was in like middle school or high school. Um, But in Izzy's case, her decision not to repost this is actually keeping a target off her back. Since the murderer doesn't know what her death fear is, they can't come after her at this point in the story. Um, so, one thing I really liked about this book is that it does alternate perspectives between Fear, the murderer, and Izzy. Um, it actually opens the first chapter or the prologue actually starts from the villain's perspective. Um, and then it continues to show glimpses into the plans and actions and motives, actually, which is very interesting because it made it more interesting to try and figure out who it is, but it also kind of gave more of an insight into why this is happening. Like I mentioned, I reviewed another book by this author um, last week, and in that one, you never see the perspective. You hear the whole story at the end once it's revealed, but you don't get any insight into why it's happening before that. That is part of the mystery, but in this, you kind of start to see why this person has decided to start this trend and murder people as a result, which is a very interesting approach to it. Um, but due to some various situations, Izzy feels a personal need to try to learn who's responsible and try to gather information rather than just leaving it to the police. I'm not going to say what those reasons are because they are plot spoilers. Um, but when more people end up dead, paranoia spreads really quickly. And when you live in a small town like she does, where everyone knows everyone, when someone starts killing, how do you know who to trust? So the pacing and suspense of this book was good. I picked it up and read the whole thing in one day. Um, I thought the characterization of the high school students was good with like the stereotypes of the popular clique, the jocks, the loners, and then like the wallflower, which is how Izzy is described. Um, they were all really accurate. I definitely know people from high school who fit into all of those, and it definitely felt like, yeah, I know this person. I've interacted with this person. So I thought that that was very realistic, and I'm sure everyone could relate to knowing people like that. Um, I enjoyed the way that this story took place in a modern social media age, even making social media a tool for the killer. Like, the killer was even making fun of how one of their targets put so much personal information, which made it very easy to target her and to find her, which I definitely think is a concern in real life, but definitely in this book. Um, and while a lot of murder mysteries and thrillers that I've read take place in isolated places with like remote areas, no cell reception, or no way to reach people, these characters had their phones. They were just living their daily lives in their own hometown, going about to like parties or school or rehearsals or whatever they were doing, and the killer was still too smart, fast, or strong for them. Which I think added to the fear of the situation, which is kind of interesting considering the title of the book is The Fear. But yeah, it was definitely adding to that. And that's exactly what the killer wanted. The killer wanted to create an environment of fear, an environment of uncertainty. And so this was the second book that I had read by this author. Um, The Island I'd already read and reviewed. Um, I will actually link that review below. But due to the fact that I saw the style of her twists and reveals once before in The Island, um, before the killer's identity was revealed in this book, I had a strong suspicion about who it was. Um, and it did turn out that I was right. Again, there was another aspect of it that I wasn't exactly sure of, but I had like a slight suspicion of it. I just wasn't sure. But I was like, okay, it's either this person, this other person, or both of them together. Um, I'm not gonna say who it is or whether it's more than one person. But with that said, I still think it was very well written, because I was still kind of second guessing the theory until a certain point shortly before the reveal. I Something happens, and as soon as it does, I'm like, oh no, there's no way. I know who it is now. Um, yeah, so I am planning to read a few more of her books and review them. Um, and I kind of do hope all of the villains don't all fall into this kind of pattern that seems to have been followed in these two, where because I'd read one before, I was kind of like, okay, I know, I think I know who it is. Because I did really enjoy this book too. But if they all kind of follow that pattern, it'll kind of be like, oh, I'll figure it out too early. Um, so the reason I'm giving it 8 out of 10 is the ending. Once again, like with The Island, I felt as though the ending was leaving me hanging. I'm giving it a bit of a higher score than I did to The Island because I felt like the ending was implied, and so it was less frustrating than the completely open ending that the islands left me with. And I do wish the end had been slightly more conclusive, but I guess it's meant to leave us hanging, and it's up to us to decide what happens after. I kind of feel like I might know what happens. I might have, like, it doesn't look good necessarily for the situation at the end. But, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think that it was um, very interesting coming to this book from having read one of the ones by this author already. With the island, it was a little bit harder to relate to some of the characters because while I do have two YouTube channels and I do this kind of thing, I'm by no means an influencer the way that those characters were. They were all like very well known, very high profile, and some of them were just kind of accidentally got popular in the islands, but some of them definitely knew. And they liked the attention. And so relating to just kind of normal high schoolers in this story, I feel like I had an easier time. And I think that it's definitely it's definitely a book that you shouldn't read when you have things to do. Like The Island, I mentioned this as well, but I read this in one day. It's not super thick, but it's not super thin either. And so once you start it, you might not be able to put it down. So I do recommend plan your time for when you're gonna read this. Um, but I did like it, and I think that I liked it slightly more than The Island because of the ending, but also just because of the relatability for me. Um, I liked the way that it was so unsuspecting. It's just the vibe of this town that I got was it's small fishing town where nothing happens, but then this starts to happen and people don't really know how to deal with it. Um, and like police are trying their best to deal with stuff, but it's just no one's expecting it, so they don't really know how to handle it. And like the parents of the main character and some of the other characters, as well as some of the victims, like they don't know how to deal with this. And so I definitely do think that it is more relatable, at least to me. And I did get into social media late compared to a lot of people that I know, but I do have social media and I try to be aware of what I'm posting and I try to be aware of like I don't post the outside of my house or I don't post like landmarks that would give away where I live or anything like that. Even though most of the people that follow me or that I follow I know in person, I still just don't do that. But there are so many people who do and they don't even think about it at all. And so I definitely thought that that was a really interesting way of addressing that issue through this book because I don't know if it's going to change anyone's mind or, make them rethink about how they post. But I definitely thought it was very interesting coming from the perspective of knowing people who are like that and knowing that I personally would never um, post things that are so revealing, but so many people do. And I think that putting it in the context of be careful what you'll post or you might get murdered is definitely more extreme than I think, online safety classes teach when they do the like 1 day thing about like phishing and like don't use your real name on certain things or that kind of thing. But It is true. People post so much without thinking. And so the thought-provoking aspect of this book, I think, was something that I didn't get as much with The Island, just because with The Island, like, you'd have to actively go out to this amusement park on this island at the time for this to be happening. But with this, it's like there's nothing this town could have done to prevent this once it started. Like, it wasn't a situation where they were able to just leave because it is their town. And I mean, some people were leaving. But it's a very different kind of fear, I guess, in this book that it could be anyone. It's a whole town of people. Um, we don't know why. Well, we do once we start to read more of Fear's perspective, but the townspeople don't know why. The townspeople don't know who it could be, why it's these particular people. Um, they start to realize that it is because of the post and it's people who've reshared it that are dying, but it's hard when there are so many people that have reposted it because they don't know who to try to protect, who could be next. Um, and there are so many different ways that people could be dying that their death fears that they posted that they don't really know where they should even try to protect people because it's not like everyone's afraid of being run over by a boat so they like patrol the marina or something. It's way more than that. And so it is definitely a very, very interesting type of thriller. I enjoyed it. I am looking forward to reading the next books that I have by this author. Um, and another thing that I wanted to mention is for me personally, I like young adult, especially when it comes to like thriller or murder mystery. I like young adult, new adult more than like full on adult. Just because personally I feel like they tend to have characters I relate to more when it's younger adult, new adult. And I think that this author definitely gets that across for me that I feel like I have had some mysteries that I've tried to read that are just so I'm sure people enjoy them and I'm sure people like them, but for me personally, I couldn't get into the story at all because it just felt so adultish and so bland. And like for me right now, I'm 22, but in those, it was like a 50-year-old going about their daily work life and something happens. And I'm sure there are people who enjoy that. For me, I just could not get into it because I couldn't relate to any characters at all. But I think that these are good for people who have the same preference as me because these characters are high schoolers. And people in the town, it's not just high schoolers that have reshared this and that are victims, but like primarily it is. Because this meme has been going around in the high school environment. Um, but I find it much easier to read. I also like the way that the spacing is because I think for me with ADHD, one of the things is I get lost on the page sometimes on books where it's like very small print or very close together. So this is on a physical sense an easy book to read as well, which is why I could get through it all in one day, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like I've ranted on for a while longer than I was planning to. Um, but that is the end of my review of The Fear by Natasha Preston. I really hope you liked it. Let me know what you're reading or if you've read this book. And please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Bye.